My Sweet Lord is a song by English musician and former Beatle George Harrison that was released in November 1970 on his triple album All Things Must Pass. Also issued as a single, Harrison's first as a solo artist, My Sweet Lord topped charts worldwide and was the biggest-selling single of 1971 in the UK. In America and Britain, the song was the first #1 single by an ex-Beatle. Harrison originally gave the song to his fellow Apple Records artist Billy Preston to record. This version, which Harrison co-produced, appeared on Preston's Encouraging Words album in September 1970. Harrison wrote My Sweet Lord in praise of the Hindu god Krishna, while at the same time intending the lyrics to serve as a call to abandon religious sectarianism through his deliberate blending of the Hebrew word hallelujah with chants of Hare Krishna, and Vedic prayer. The recording features producer Phil Spector's wall of sound treatment and heralded the arrival of Harrison's much-admired slide guitar technique, which one biographer described as being musically as distinctive a signature as the mark of Zorro. Preston, Ringo Starr, Eric Clapton and the group Badfinger are among the other musicians appearing on the recording. Later in the 1970s, My Sweet Lord was at the center of a heavily publicized copyright infringement suit, due to its similarity to the Ronnie Mac song He's So Fine, a 1963 hit for the New York girl group The Chiffons. In 1976, Harrison was found to have subconsciously plagiarized the earlier tune, a verdict that had repercussions throughout the music industry. He claimed to have used the out-of-copyright Oh Happy Day, a Christian hymn, as his inspiration for the song's melody. Harrison performed My Sweet Lord at the concert for Bangladesh in August 1971, and it remains the most popular composition from his post-Beatles career. He reworked the song as My Sweet Lord for inclusion as a bonus track on the 30th anniversary reissue of All Things Must Pass. Many artists have covered the song including Andy Williams, Peggy Lee, Edwin Starr, Johnny Mathis, Nina Simone, Julio Iglesias, Richie Havens, Megadeth, Boy George, Elton John, Jim James, Bonnie Bramlett and Elliott Smith. My Sweet Lord is ranked 460th on Rolling Stone magazine's list of the 500 greatest songs of all time. The song reached #1 in Britain for a second time when re-released in January 2002, 2 months after Harrison's death. As of 2014, My Sweet Lord remains the last #1 hit in the UK by a former member of the Beatles. Background: George Harrison began writing My Sweet Lord in December 1969, when he, Billy Preston and Eric Clapton were in Copenhagen, Denmark, as guest artists on Delaney and Bonnie's European tour. By this time, Harrison had already written the gospel-influenced Hear Me Lord, and Gopala Krishna, and the African-American spiritual Sing One for the Lord. He had also produced 2 religious-themed hit singles on the Beatles' Apple record label, Preston's That's the Way God Planned It, and Radha Krishna Temple's Hare Krishna Mantra. The latter was a musical adaptation of the 5,000-year-old Vaishnava Hindu mantra, performed by members of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, colloquially known as the Hare Krishna movement. Harrison now wanted to fuse the messages of the Christian and Gaudiya Vaishnava faiths into what musical biographer Simon Leng terms gospel incantation with a Vedic chant. The Copenhagen stopover marked the end of the Delaney and Bonnie tour, with a 3-night residency at the Falconer Theatre on December 12. According to Harrison's 1976 court testimony, My Sweet Lord was conceived while the band members were attending a backstage press conference and he had ducked out to an upstairs room at the theatre. Harrison recalled vamping chords on guitar and alternating between sung phrases of Hallelujah and Hare Krishna. He later took the idea to the others, and the chorus vocals were developed further. Band leader Delaney Bramlett's more recent version of events is that the idea originated from Harrison asking him how to go about writing a genuine gospel song, and that Bramlett demonstrated by scats singing the words Oh My Lord while wife Bonnie and singer Rita Coolidge added gospel hallelujahs in reply. British music journalist John Harris has questioned the accuracy of Bramlett's account, however, comparing it to a fisherman's It Was This Big type bragging story. Using as his inspiration the Edwin Hawkins singer's rendition of an 18th-century hymn, Oh Happy Day, Harrison continued working on the theme. He completed the song, with some help from Preston, once they had returned to London. Composition. The song's lyrics reflect Harrison's often stated desire for a direct relationship with God, expressed in simple words that all believers could affirm, regardless of their religion. Author Ian Ingalls observes a degree of understandable impatience in the first verse's line, "Really want to see you, Lord, but it takes so long, my Lord." By the end of the song's second verse, Harrison declares a wish to know God also and attempts to reconcile the impatience. "I really want to know you, really want to go with you, really want to show you, Lord, that it won't take long, my Lord." Following this verse, in response to the main vocal's repetition of the song title, Harrison devised a choral line singing the Hebrew word of praise, Hallelujah, common in the Christian and Jewish religions. Later in the song, after an instrumental break, these voices return, now chanting the first 12 words of the Hare Krishna mantra, known more reverentially as the Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. These Sanskrit words are the main mantra of the Hare Krishna faith, with which Harrison identified, although he did not belong to any spiritual organization. In his 1980 autobiography, I, Me, Mine, Harrison explained that he intended repeating and alternating Hallelujah and Hare Krishna to show that the two terms meant quite the same thing, as well as to have listeners chanting the mantra before they knew what was going on. Following the Sanskrit lines, Hallelujah is sung twice more before the mantra repeats, along with an ancient Vedic prayer. According to Hindu tradition, this prayer is dedicated to a devotee's spiritual teacher, or guru, and equates the teacher to the divine Trimurti Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva and to the Godhead, Brahman. Guru Brahma, Guru Vaya to the first A to the first Guru Deva Yen, Guru Zakar to the first DT, Para to the first Florin Brahma, Tismayangstram Raguradnamayen. Former Krishna devotee Joshua Green translates the lines as follows: "I offer homage to my Guru, who is as great as the creator Brahma, the maintainer Vishnu, the destroyer Shiva, and who is the very energy of God." The prayer is the third verse of the Guru Stotram, a 14-verse hymn in praise of Hindu spiritual teachers. Some Christian fundamentalist anti-rock activists objected that chanting Hare Krishna in My Sweet Lord was anti-Christian or satanic, while some born-again Christians adopted the song as an anthem. Several commentators cite the mantra and the simplicity of Harrison's lyrics as central to the song's universality. The lyrics are not directed at a specific manifestation of a single faith's deity, Ingalls writes, but rather to the concept of one God whose essential nature is unaffected by particular interpretations and who pervades everything, is present everywhere, is all-knowing and all-powerful, and transcends time and space. All of us Christian, Hindu, Muslim, Jew, Buddhist can address our gods in the same way, using the same phrase, My Sweet Lord. Billy Preston's version, with the Beatles still together officially in December 1969, Harrison had no plans to make a solo album of his own and reportedly intended to offer My Sweet Lord to Edwin Hawkins. Instead, following the Delaney and Bonnie tour, he decided to record it with Billy Preston, for whom Harrison was co-producing a second Apple album, Encouraging Words. Recording took place at Olympic Studios in London, in January 1970, with Preston as principal musician, supported by the guitarist, bass player and drummer from The Temptations' backing band. The Edwin Hawkins singers happened to be on tour in the UK as well, so Harrison invited them to participate. Hawkins' gospel group also overdubbed vocals onto the Harrison Preston collaboration Sing One for the Lord at this time. Preston's version of My Sweet Lord differs from Harrison's later reading in that the Hallelujah refrain appears from the start of the song and, rather than the full mantra section, the words Hare Krishna are sung only twice throughout the whole track. With the Vedic prayer likewise absent, Simon Leng views this original recording as a possible definitive roots take of the song, thanks to its pure gospel groove, and Hawkins' participation. In his review of Encouraging Words, Bruce Eder of AllMusic describes My Sweet Lord, and All Things Must Pass as stunning gospel numbers that make the Harrison versions seem pallid. Preston's My Sweet Lord was a minor hit in Europe when issued as a single there in September 1970, but otherwise, encouraging words made little impression commercially. The album and single releases were delayed for at least 2 months in the United States, where My Sweet Lord would climb to number 90 on the Billboard Hot 100 by the end of February 1971, helped by the enormous success of Harrison's version. Recording, 5 months after the Olympic session, with the Beatles having now broken up, My Sweet Lord was one of 30 or more tracks that Harrison recorded for his All Things Must Pass triple album. It was a song he had been reluctant to record, for fear of committing himself publicly to such an overt religious message. "I was sticking my neck out on the chopping block because now I would have to live up to something," Harrison explained in I Mean Mine, "but at the same time I thought nobody's saying it. I wish somebody else was doing it." With Phil Spector co-producing the sessions at Abbey Road Studios, Preston again played on the track, along with Clapton, Ringo Starr, Jim Gordon and all 4 members of Badfinger. The identity of the remaining musicians has traditionally been open to question, with drummer Alan White once claiming he played on the song, with Carl Radle on bass, Starr on tambourine and John Lennon among the rhythm guitarists. The common view, following research by Simon Leng, is that Harrison and Spector chose from a number of rhythm tracks before selecting the master take, which featured, among others, Klaus Fuhrmann on bass and Gary Wright on a second keyboard. Bruce Spicer suggests that Peter Frampton may have added acoustic guitar after the main session. Harrison's original vocal appears to have been acceptable, according to notes written by Spector in August, but the chorus vocals, his harmonized slide guitar parts, and John Barham's orchestral arrangement were overdubbed during the next 2 months, partly at Trident Studios in central London. Leng describes the recording as a painstakingly crafted tableau of sound, beginning with a bank of chiming acoustic guitars and the flourish of zither strings that introduces Harrison's slide guitar motif. At close to the 2-minute mark, after the tension-building bridge, a subtle 2-semitone shift in key signals the song's release from its extended introduction. This higher register is then complemented by Harrison's increasingly impassioned vocal and the subsequent timely reappearance of his twin slide guitars, before the backing vocals deftly switch to the Sanskrit mantra and prayer. Leng also notes the Indian music aspects of the production, in the samandal-like zithers, representing the sympathetic strings of a sitar, and the slide guitar's evocation of sarangi, dilruba and other string instruments. In an interview for Martin Scorsese's 2011 documentary on George Harrison, Spector recalls that he liked the results so much, he insisted that My Sweet Lord be the lead single from the album. This later, rock version of the song was markedly different from the Oh Happy Day-inspired gospel arrangement in musical and structural terms, aligning Harrison's composition with pop music conventions, but also drawing out the similarities of its melody line with that of the Chiffons' 1963 hit He's So Fine. Spicer suggests that this was due to Harrison being so focused on the feel of his record, while record collector-editor Peter Doggett wrote in 2001 that, despite Harrison's inspiration for My Sweet Lord's having come from Oh Happy Day, in the hands of producer and arranger Phil Spector, it came out as a carbon copy of the Chiffons' song. Chip Madinger and Mark Easter remark on the sad fact that Spector, as master of all that was girl group during the early 60s, failed to recognize the similarities. Release: before arriving in New York on October 28 to carry out mastering on All Things Must Pass, Harrison had announced that no single would be issued so as not to detract from the impact of the triple album. Apple's U.S. executive, Alan Steckler, together with business manager Alan Klein and Spector all pushed for My Sweet Lord to be released immediately, however, even though Billy Preston's version was already scheduled for release as a single in America the following month. Film director Howard Worth recalls a preliminary finance meeting for the Raga documentary that began with the ex-Beatle asking him to listen to a selection of songs and pick his favorite, which was My Sweet Lord. Harrison relented, and My Sweet Lord was issued as the album's lead single around the world, but not in Britain. The release date was November 23, 1970 in the United States. The mix of the song differed from that found on All Things Must Pass by featuring less echo and a slightly altered backing vocal track. Both sides of the North American picture sleeve consisted of a Barry Feinstein photo of Harrison taken through a window at his recently purchased Friar Park home, with some of the estate's trees reflected in the glass. Released as a double A-side with Isn't It a Pity, with Apple Catalog number 2995 in America, both sides of the disc featured a full Apple label. Public demand via constant airplay in Britain led to a belated UK release, on January 15, 1971. There, as Apple of 5884, the single was backed by What Is Life, a song that Apple soon released elsewhere internationally as the follow-up to My Sweet Lord. Harrison's version of My Sweet Lord was an international #1 hit by the end of 1970 and through the early months of 1971 the first solo single by a Beatle to reach the top, and the biggest seller by any of the four throughout the 1970s. Without the support of any concert appearances or promotional interviews by Harrison, the single's commercial success was due to its impact on radio, where, Harrison biographer Gary Tillery writes, the song rolled across the airwaves like a juggernaut, with commanding presence, much the way Dylan's Like a Rolling Stone had arrived in the mid-60s. Elton John recalls first hearing My Sweet Lord in a taxi and names it as the last of the era's great singles. I thought, oh my God, and I got chills. You know when a record starts on the radio, and it's great, and you think, oh, what is this, what is this, what is this? The only other record I ever felt that way about, afterwards, was Brown Sugar. In his 40-page Harrison tribute article for Rolling Stone in 2002, Michael Gilmore credited My Sweet Lord as being as pervasive on radio and in youth consciousness as anything the Beatles had produced. The single was certified gold by the Recording Industry Association of America on December 14, 1970 for sales of over 1 million copies. It reached #1 on the US Billboard Hot 100 on December 26, remaining on top for 4 weeks, 3 of which coincided with All Things Must Pass a 7-week reign atop the Billboard Albums chart. In Britain, My Sweet Lord entered the charts at #7, before hitting #1 on January 30 and staying there for 5 weeks. It was the biggest-selling single of 1971 in the UK and performed similarly well around the world, particularly in France and Germany, where it held the top spot for 9 and 10 weeks, respectively. In his 2001 appraisal of Harrison's Apple recordings, for Record Collector, Doggett described Harrison as arguably the most successful rock star on the planet over this period, adding, My Sweet Lord and All Things Must Pass top charts all over the world, easily outstripping other solo Beatles projects later in the year, such as Ram and Imagine. The single's worldwide sales amounted to 5 million copies by 1978, making it one of the best-selling singles of all time. By 2010, according to Ingalls, My Sweet Lord has sold over 10 million copies. The song returned to the #1 position again in the UK when reissued in January 2002, 2 months after Harrison's death from cancer at the age of 58. Reception. Peter Lavezoli, author of The Dawn of Indian Music in the West, has written of Harrison's first solo single, My Sweet Lord was everything that people wanted to hear in November 1970, shimmering harmonies, lustrous acoustic guitars, a solid Ringo Starr backbeat, and an exquisite, Harrison guitar solo. Reviewing the single for Rolling Stone, John Landor called the track sensational. In an era when songs by Hare Krishna Temple and adaptations of the Christian hymns O Happy Day, and Amazing Grace were all worldwide hits, Ben Jerson of Rolling Stone observed that the substituting of Harrison's Hare Krishna refrain for the trivial do lang, s of He's So Fine was a sign of the times. In his December 1970 album review for NME, Alan Smith bemoaned the apparent lack of a UK single release for My Sweet Lord, and noted that the song seems to owe something to He's So Fine. To Jerson, it was an obvious rewrite of the Chiffons hit, and within 2 months US music publisher Bright Tunes had served a writ on Harrison citing unauthorized copyright infringement. In a January 1971 review for NME, Derek Johnson expressed surprise at Apple's delay in releasing the single in the UK, before declaring, in my opinion, this record finally and irrevocably establishes George as a talent equivalent to either Lennon or McCartney. More recently, AllMusic's Richie Unterberger explains the international popularity of Harrison's single, My Sweet Lords has a quasi-religious feel, but nevertheless has enough conventional pop appeal to reach mainstream listeners who may or may not care to dig into the spiritual lyrical message. Added to this was a slide guitar riff that Simon Leng describes as among the best-known guitar passages in popular music. Ian Ingalls highlights the combination of Harrison's evident lack of artifice, and Spector's excellent production, such that My Sweet Lord can be heard as a prayer, a love song, an anthem, a contemporary gospel track, or a piece of perfect pop. Due to the ensuing plagiarism suit, My Sweet Lord became somewhat stigmatized by association, to the point where no mention of the song was complete without a reference to He's So Fine. My Sweet Lord was ranked 460th on Rolling Stone magazine's list of the 500 greatest songs of all time in 2004, yet the accompanying text only briefly mentioned the success of the single and Harrison's teardrop slide licks before concentrating on the controversial lawsuit. While acknowledging the common ground between the two songs, music critic David Fricke describes Harrison's composition as the honest child of Black American sacred song. Writing around the time of All Things Must Pass Euro's 2001 reissue, again for Rolling Stone, Anthony de Curtis described My Sweet Lord as capturing the sweet satisfactions of faith, while to Michael Gilmore, it is an irresistible devotional. At the end of 1971, My Sweet Lord topped the Melody Maker readers' polls for both Single of the Year, and World Single of the Year. In the U.S. publication Record World, the song was also voted Best Single and Harrison was honored as Top Male Vocalist of 1971. In June 1972, Harrison won 2 Ivor Novello Songwriters Awards for My Sweet Lord. In 2010, AOL radio listeners voted My Sweet Lord the best song from George Harrison's solo years, ahead of Blow Away, and What Is Life. Mick Jagger and Keith Richards have both named it among their personal favorites of all Harrison's songs, along with While My Guitar Gently Weeps. According to the website Acclaimed Music, My Sweet Lord has also appeared in the following critics' best song lists and books, among others, the 7,500 Most Important Songs of 1944 Euro 2000 by author Bruce Pollock, Dave Thompson's 1000 Songs That Rock Your World, Ultimate Classic Rock's Top 100 Classic Rock Songs, then Me Euro's 100 Best Songs of the 1970s, and the same magazine's 500 Greatest Songs of All Time. Copyright infringement suit. Initial action. On February 10, 1971, Bright Tunes filed suit against Harrison and associated organizations, alleging copyright infringement of the late Ronnie Mac's song He's So Fine. In I Me Mine, Harrison admits to having thought, "Why didn't I realize?" when others started pointing out the similarity between the two songs. By June that year, country singer Jody Miller had released a cover of He's So Fine incorporating Harrison's My Sweet Lord slide guitar riffs, thus really putting the screws in from his point of view. On Harrison's behalf, manager Alan Klein entered into negotiations with Bright Tunes to resolve the issue, by offering to buy the financially ailing publisher's entire catalog, but no settlement could be reached before the company was forced into receivership. While comparing the two compositions, author and musicologist Dominic Butler writes that both songs have a 3-syllable title refrain followed by a 5-3-2 descent of the major scale in the tonic key. Respective tempos are similar, 121 and 145 beats per minute. In the respective B sections, there is a similar ascent through 5-6-8, but the chiffons distinctively retain the G tonic for 4 bars and, on the repeat of the motif, uniquely go to an A-note 9th embellishment over the first syllable of Gunner. Harrison, on the other hand, introduces the more complex harmony of a relative minor, as well as the fundamental and distinctly original slide guitar motif. While the case was on hold, Harrison and his former bandmates Lennon and Starr chose to sever ties with Klein at the end of March 1973, an acrimonious split that led to further lawsuits for the 3 ex-Beatles. Bright Tunes and Harrison later resumed their negotiations. His final offer of 40% of My Sweet Lord's U.S. composers and publishers' royalties, along with a stipulation that he retain copyright for his song, was viewed as a good one by Bright's legal representation, yet the offer was rejected. It later transpired that Klein had renewed his efforts to purchase the ailing company, now solely for himself, and to that end was supplying Bright Tunes with insider details regarding My Sweet Lord's sales figures and copyright value. In the build-up to the case going to court, the Chiffons recorded a version of My Sweet Lord, with the aim of drawing attention to the lawsuit. Beatles author Alan Clayson has described the plagiarism suit as the most notorious civil action of the decade, the extremity of the proceedings provoked by a combination of the commercial success of Harrison's single and the intervention of litigation-loving Mr. Klein. Court hearing and ruling Bright Tunes Music v. Harrison's music finally went to the United States District Court on February 23, 1976, to hear evidence on the allegation of plagiarism. Harrison attended the proceedings in New York, with a guitar, and each side called musical experts to support its argument. After reconvening in September 1976, the court found that Harrison had subconsciously copied the earlier tune, since he admitted to having been aware of the Chiffons' recording. Judge Richard Owen said in his conclusion to the proceedings, "Did Harrison deliberately use the music of He's So Fine? I do not believe he did so deliberately. Nevertheless, it is clear that My Sweet Lord is the very same song as He's So Fine with different words, and Harrison had access to He's So Fine. This is, under the law, infringement of copyright, and is no less so even though subconsciously accomplished. Damages and subsequent litigation with liability established. The court then recommended an amount for the damages to be paid by Harrison and Apple to Bright Tunes, which Owen totaled at $1,599,987 a amounting to three-quarters of the royalty revenue raised in North America from My Sweet Lord, as well as a significant proportion of that from the All Things Must Pass album. This figure has been considered over-harsh and unrealistic by some observers, since it both underplayed the unique elements of Harrison's recording the universal spiritual message of its lyrics, the signature guitar hook, and its production and ignored the critical acclaim his album received in its own right. Elliot Huntley observes, "People don't usually hear a single and then automatically go and buy an expensive box set triple album on the off chance." The award factored in the royalty revenue raised from My Sweet Lord's inclusion on the recent Best of George Harrison compilation, though at a more moderate percentage than for the 1970 album. The ruling set new legal precedents and was a personal blow for Harrison, who admitted he was too paranoid to write anything new for some time afterwards. Early reaction in the music industry saw Little Richard claim for breach of copyright in a track recorded by the Beatles in 1964 for the Beatles For Sale album, as well as Ringo Starr credit songwriter Clifford T. Ward as the inspiration for his Ringo's rotogravure song Lady Gay. In the UK, the corresponding damages suit, brought by Peter Morris Music, was swiftly settled out of court in July 1977. During the drawn-out damages portion of the U.S. suit, events played into Harrison's hands when Klein's ABKCO Industries finally purchased the copyright to He's So Fine, and with it all litigation claims, after which Klein proceeded to negotiate sale of the song to Harrison. On February 19, 1981, the court decided that due to Klein's duplicity in the case, Harrison would only have to pay ABKCO $587,000 instead of the $1.6 million award, and he would also receive the rights to He's So Fine $587,000 being the amount Klein had paid Bright Tunes for the song in 1978. The court ruled that the former manager's actions had been in breach of a fiduciary duty owed to Harrison, a duty that continued even after the principal-agent relationship ended. The litigation continued through to the early 1990s, however, as the finer points of the settlement were ironed out. In his 1993 essay on Bright Tunes v. Harrison, Joseph self-describes it as without question, one of the longest-running legal battles ever to be litigated in the United States. Matters would not ultimately be concluded until March 1998. Subsequent charges of plagiarism in the music industry have resulted in a policy of swift settlement and therefore limited damage to an artist's credibility. The Rolling Stones' Anybody Seen My Baby? Oasis' Shaker Maker, Whatever, and Step Out, and the Verve's Bittersweet Symphony are all examples of songs whose writing credits were hastily altered to acknowledge composers of a plagiarized work, with the minimum of litigation. Shortly before the ruling was handed down in September 1976, Harrison wrote and recorded a song inspired by the court case the upbeat This Song which includes the line "This tune has nothing bright about it." The 1960s soul hits "I Can't Help Myself" and "Rescue Me," as well as his own composition "You," are all name-checked in the lyrics, as if to demonstrate the point that, as he later put it, 99% of the popular music that can be heard is reminiscent of something or other. In a 1980 interview with Playboy magazine, John Lennon expressed his doubts about the notion of subconscious plagiarism, saying, "He must have known, you know. He's smarter than that. He could have changed a couple of bars in that song and nobody could ever have touched him, but he just let it go and paid the price. Maybe he thought God would just sort of let him off." Ringo Starr's reaction was more charitable. "There's no doubt that the tune is similar, but how many songs have been written with other melodies in mind? George's version is much heavier than the chiffons he might have done it with the original in the back of his mind, but he's just very unlucky that someone wanted to make it a test case in court." Speaking to his friend and mine editor Derek Taylor in 1979, Harrison said of the episode, "I don't feel guilty or bad about it. In fact, it saved many a heroin addict's life. I know the motive behind writing the song in the first place and its effect far exceeded the legal hassle." Re-releases and alternative versions. Since its initial release on All Things Must Pass, My Sweet Lords has appeared on the 1976 compilation The Best of George Harrison and 2009's career-spanning Let It Roll, Songs by George Harrison. The original UK single was reissued on Christmas Eve 1976 in Britain, a provocative move by EMI, given the publicity the lawsuit had attracted that year for the song. 1975 The Pirates song on December 26, 1975, Harrison made a guest appearance on his friend Eric Idle's BBC Two comedy show Rutland Weekend Television, sending up his serious public image, and seemingly about to perform My Sweet Lord. As a running gag throughout the half-hour show, Harrison interrupts the sketches, trying to land an acting role as a pirate, but gets turned down each time by RWT regulars Idle and Neil Innes, who simply want him to play the part of George Harrison. He then reappears at the end in more normal attire, strumming the well-known introduction to My Sweet Lord on an acoustic guitar, and backed by the house band. Instead of continuing with the song, Harrison finally takes his chance to play Pirate Bob by abruptly segging into a sea shanty to the horror of the greasy Camporee, played by Idle. The other musicians follow Harrison's lead, after which a group of dancers appear on stage and the show's closing credits roll. This performance is known as the Pirate Song, co-written by Harrison and Idle, and the recording is only available unofficially on bootleg compilations such as Pirates Songs. Observing the parallels with Harrison's real-life reluctance to play the pop star, Simon Leng writes, "There was great resonance within these gags." 2001 My Sweet Lord In January 2001, Harrison included a new version of the song as a bonus track on the remastered All Things Must Pass album. My Sweet Lord featured Harrison sharing vocals with Sam Brown, daughter of his friend Joe Brown, backed by mostly new instrumentation, including acoustic guitar by his son Danny and tambourine by Ray Cooper. The track opens with a snippet of sitar, to emphasize its spiritual roots, Leng suggests. On release, Harrison explained that his motivation for remaking the song was partly to play a better slide guitar solo. He also cited the spiritual response that the song had traditionally received, together with his interest in reworking the tune to avoid the contentious musical notes, as further reasons. Of the extended slide guitar break on My Sweet Lord, Leng writes, Harrison had never made so clear a musical statement that his signature bottleneck sound was as much his tool for self-expression as his vocal cords. Elliot Huntley opines that Harrison's vocal was more gospel-inflected, and perhaps even more sincere than on the original recording, given his deteriorating health during the final year of his life. This version also appeared on the January 2002 posthumous release of the My Sweet Lord single a 3-song charity CD comprising the original 1970 71 hit, the acoustic run-through of Let It Down, and Harrison's reworking of the title song. Proceeds from the single went to the Material World Charitable Foundation, set up by Harrison in April 1973. For some months after the single's release, a portion of My Sweet Lord played on Harrison's official website, on a constant loop, over screen images of lotus petals scattering and then reforming. The song also appears on the 2014 Apple Years 1968 €75 reissue of All Things Must Pass. 2011 a Euro demo version in November 2011, a demo of My Sweet Lord, with Harrison backed by Just Women and Starr, was included on the deluxe edition CD accompanying the British DVD release of Martin Scorsese's George Harrison, Living in the Material World documentary. Described as an early live take by compilation producer Giles Martin, and an acoustic hosanna by David Fricke of Rolling Stone, it was recorded at the start of the All Things Must Pass sessions and was later released internationally on Early Takes, Volume 1 in May 2012. Live versions: Harrison performed My Sweet Lord at every one of his relatively few solo concerts, starting with the 2 concert for Bangladesh shows at New York's Madison Square Garden on August 1, 1971. The recording released on the subsequent live album was taken from the evening show and begins with Harrison's spoken Hare Krishna over his opening acoustic guitar chords. Among the 24 backing musicians was a soul choir featuring singers Claudia Lanier, Dolores Hall and Joe Green, but it was Harrison who sung the end of song Guru Stotram Prayer in his role as lead vocalist, unlike on the studio recording. The slide guitar parts were played by Eric Clapton and Jesse Ed Davis. During his 1974 North American tour, Harrison's only one there as a solo artist, My Sweet Lord was performed as the encore at each show. In contrast with the subtle shift from Hallelujahs to Sanskrit chants on his 1970 original, Harrison used the song to engage his audience in the practice of chanting the holy names of the Lord, or Kirtan a Euro from Om Christ and Krishna, to Buddha and Allah a Euro with varying degrees of success. Backed by a band that again included Billy Preston, Harrison turned My Sweet Lord into an R&B-styled extended gospel funk piece, closer in its arrangement to Preston's encouraging words version and lasting up to 10 minutes. The performance of the song at Tulsa's Assembly Center on November 21 marked the only guest appearance of the tour when Leon Russell joined the band on stage. Harrison's second and final solo tour took place in Japan in December 1991. With Clapton's band. A live version of My Sweet Lord recorded at the Tokyo Dome, on December 14, was released the following year on the Live in Japan album. Personnel: the following musicians are believed to have played on Harrison's original version of My Sweet Lord: George Harrison a Euro vocals, acoustic guitar, slide guitars, backing vocals, Eric Clapton a Euro acoustic guitar, Pete Ham a Euro acoustic guitar, Tom Evans a Euro acoustic guitar, Joey Molland a Euro acoustic guitar, Billy Preston a Euro piano, Gary Wright a Euro electric piano, Klaus Voormann a Euro bass, Ringo Starr a Euro drums, percussion, Jim Gordon a Euro drums, percussion, Mike Gibbons a Euro tambourine, John Barham a Euro harmonium, string and woodwind arrangements, uncredited a Euro zithers. Cover versions: Andy Williams covered My Sweet Lord on his 1971 Love Story album, backed by members of the choir of the Weehawken O' the Valley of Reseda, California. Ronnie Aldrich, British easy listening pianist, covered the song, as well as Harrison's What Is Life, on his 1971 album, also entitled Love Story. Tony Orlando and Dawn performed the song on their television series in the 1970s. Homer Louis Randolph III recorded a version of My Sweet Lord for his eponymous 1971 album. Peggy Lee recorded My Sweet Lord in April 1971 for her album Where Did They Go?, arranged by Don Sebesky. It was issued on CD in 2008. Phil Allen covered the song on his 1971 album The Happy Hammond Goes Pop. Ray Conniff's version was released on another 1971 album titled Love Story. Bowler Seat's version was released on his 1971 album Shibaba. Johnny Mathis covered My Sweet Lord on his Love Story album. Edwin Starr recorded a version in 1971, produced by Norman Whitfield, which was released as a single and appeared on his Involved album. A version by Eddie Arnold appeared on his 1971 album Welcome to My World. Also in 1971, John Holt recorded a reggae version of My Sweet Lord, without the background chorus of Hallelujahs and Krishna references. Another 1971 easy-listening version of My Sweet Lord was recorded by Stu Phillips and the Holleridge Strings, for their Beatles tribute album The George, John, Paul and Ringo Songbook. Marianne Williams covered My Sweet Lord on her 1971 album Standing Here Wondering Which Way to Go. The song was later released on Day Trippers, Songs of the Beatles. French orchestral leader Frank Porcel recorded the song for his Friends album in 1971. Swedish jazz singer Monica Zetterlund recorded the Swedish-language cover Do Mitt Live in 1971. Another French orchestrator, Paul Mauriat, recorded My Sweet Lord for his 1972 album Le Grand Orchestre de Paul Mauriat du Les Beatles. Italian singer Ivor Zanicki covered the song on her album Fantasia N'2, The Beatles in 1972. Nina Simone performed an 18-minute gospel reworking of My Sweet Lord at Fort Dix before a group of African-American soldiers, a version released on her 1972 album Emergency Ward. She interspersed the song with the David Nelson poem Today is a Killer, at the end of which, God is accused of being a killer, giving the otherwise exuberant atmosphere of the performance an apocalyptic ending. No references to Krishna appear in Simone's version. Richie Havens covered the song on his 1972 live album Richie Havens on Stage, a version later released on the 1987 album Sings Beatles and Dylan. Also in 1972, The Tribe recorded the song for an album titled Bangladesh, which included cover versions of other highlights from the concert for Bangladesh. In 1973, the Violinaires covered My Sweet Lord on their album Groovin' with Jesus. Marjorie McCoy released her version of the song on the 1973 album The Other Side. In 1975, Julio Iglesias covered the song on his album El Ama, singing it in English even though the song was retitled in Spanish as Mi Dulce Si Plus or Minus Or. The Chiffons version of the song was released as a non-album single in 1975. Larry Norman covered My Sweet Lord on his 1977 album Streams of White Light into Darkened Corners, and like John Holt, omitted the Hallelujah refrains and references to Krishna. On her 1978 Christmas TV special, Dolly Parton performed the song as part of a spiritual medley, with guest Cher and a choir, with only Hallelujah being chanted. The song was briefly included in Stars on 45's medley of songs, released as a single in May 1981. For his 1981 Don't Give an album, Leon Patillo recorded a heavily revised version of My Sweet Lord. 530 covered the song for the anti-poll tax album Alvin Lives, released in 1990. Boy George recorded a version of the song in 1992 for the Ruby Tracks, the NME's Roaring 40 compilation album. Spanish house music band PCA released their version of My Sweet Lord as a single in 1995. Stacey Q covered My Sweet Lord on her 1997 album Boomerang. Swedish band Brainpool recorded the song as a medley with He's So Fine, and released it as a single in 1997, titled My Sweet Lord. In December 1997, Megadeth played the song live at their concert at the Centro Cultural Recoleta in Buenos Aires. The Wailing Souls covered My Sweet Lord for their 1998 album Psychedelic Souls. In 1999, an instrumental version of My Sweet Lord was included on Aretha Franklin's Amazing Grace, the complete recordings collection, a repackaging of her best-selling album Amazing Grace, recorded live in a Los Angeles Baptist church in January 1972. David Young recorded the song for his 2000 covers album Songbook. At the American Music Awards in January 2002, soul singer Luther Vandross performed a medley of Something, and My Sweet Lord in tribute to Harrison, among others who died in 2001. In April 2002, Elton John, Sting, James Taylor, Ravi Shankar, Anushka Shankar and others performed My Sweet Lord to close the Harrison tribute opening portion of the Rock for the Rainforest benefit concert, held at Carnegie Hall in New York City. Crown of Thorns covered this track on their 2002 album Karma. Richard Clayderman recorded a cover of My Sweet Lord for his 2002 album Everybody Loves Somebody Sometime. At the concert for George on November 29, 2002, The song was performed by Billy Preston, with Sam Brown joining on backing vocals. In 2003, Brazilian artist Emerson Nogueira included a cover of My Sweet Lord on his album Versapando Acústica 3. B.B. Winans recorded a version with specifically Christian, additional verses on his album My Christmas Prayer. Gurliman also covered this song, released on their 2003 album Remember Who I Am. Danny Colfax Malin included My Sweet Lord on his album George Harrison's compositions interpreted on piano in 2004. Reggae artist Little Roy, a Rastafarian, recorded the song for his 2005 album Children of the Most High, replacing the background chorus with sung references to Rastafari. Les Fradkin's cover was released in 2005 on his Something for George tribute album, featuring guest appearances from Richie Fury and former Apple recording artist Lon Van Eaton. Joel Harrison covered My Sweet Lord on his album Harrison on Harrison, Jazz Explanations of George Harrison, released in October 2005. Nina Hagen recorded a version of My Sweet Lord in 2008. John Mayer performed the song live throughout 2008, notably during his performance at that year's Glastonbury Festival. A version by Gary Christian and Deza Basshead appeared on the 2008 charity album Liverpool, the number one's album. As Ibiza covered this track on their 2009 album I See Ye. Jim James covered 6 of Harrison's songs, including My Sweet Lord, on his 2009 EP tribute to Klaus Vuman, who had played bass on Harrison's studio version and on the Concert for Bangladesh performance of the song, included a cover of My Sweet Lord on his 2009 solo album A Side Man's Journey. Bonnie Bramnett supplied lead vocals on the track. Kevin Max has covered this song, with no references to Krishna, for Christian audiences. Elliott Smith performed My Sweet Lord live with Grandaddy. Jose Feliciano has also played this song live. Hooray for the Riff Raff contributed My Sweet Lord to Harrison Covered, a tribute CD accompanying the November 2011 issue of Mojo magazine. In 2014, Brian Wilson played this song live during a tribute to George Harrison. Accolades Grammy Awards Charts Peak positions Year-end charts Certifications and sales Citations Sources External links The Super 70s, My Sweet Lord / Isn't It a Pity from the Billboard Book of Number 1 Hits by Frederick Bronson Bright Tunes Music v. Harris Songs at UC Berkeley School of Law, The My Sweet Lord / He's So Fine plagiarism suit by Joseph C. Self, full lyrics of this song at Metro Lyrics.